Welcome to the Pharms Not Farms podcast. I'm here today with a very special guest, and we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to all of us. How would we ever consider protecting local resources from big companies who want to do drilling or mining? And, it's something that may not have yet affected us, though the people who it has affected and it is affecting are very passionate about it for a very good reason. And this is it's a big deal for many in our country, in our world. And the woman that I'm sitting next to, honored to, is somebody who is a strong activist and a mother and a farmer. And so, Amanda, would you be so kind to introduce yourself so that we can get a little glimpse of who you are first before we talk?
Well, my name is Amanda, and I think you covered the things I'm most proud of is being a mother and an activist. And I love the land. Started, my first activism was against Monsanto and their just effects on the bees. And then that grew to Standing Rock, and social justice and environmental justice are very intertwined. And then discovered that they were, that some large mining behemoths were attempting to take some of the natural resources here in the St. Vrain Valley, which is the least developed river valley in the Front Range. We're in unincorporated Boulder County. So I founded, along with some wonderful neighbors, a nonprofit called Save Our St. Vrain Valley.
Mm-hmm. And so St. Vrain, tell us about St. Vrain. What is St. Vrain?
Well, I think the valley is named after the St. Vrain River.
Okay.
And St. Vrain, I believe, was a French trapper. That's some of the history of the land. So
aside from the trapper that it was named after, the river is basically the main stream, so to speak, or the backbone of the valley. Is that kind of a good way to talk about it in terms of what feeds us, anything that allows us to grow our own crops? Or
sure. I mean, the St. Vrain River is the source of our water here in the valley.
The only source.
It's the only source, and it's an agricultural valley. Uh-huh. Some of the fields in the project area that we have been protecting, that was proposed for mining, would basically reallocate or rezone those fields, and they're here because of the water. Mm-hmm.
So one of the reasons why I asked you here today is because of your activist work, and I feel as though I'm wearing a Standing Rock shirt, and if you know about Standing Rock, or if you don't, it's a reservation. An indigenous reservation, and there's nations living there who have a water source, just as same water source as Bismarck, Dakota, and there was a big oil operation to send oil, I believe, from Canada through this country, and through through rivers and cities, and or maybe to Canada, or ever the more it didn't benefit that area. It was oil being pushed through pipelines, and it got rerouted from Bismarck to native lands, and it was it was a big deal. A lot of people did not want their only source of water and their home to be risked with more pipelines that people know to leak over time and kill whatever's around it and do serious harm. So ever the more, that was a big deal. And when talking about water is life. It's what we're basically made out of. It's what we need to survive more than anything else other than breathing. And good, perhaps not getting, good the environment. But yeah, water is life. So it's important for us to protect our water sources. And that's a big, it's an area that a lot of us are not necessarily paying attention to. A lot of us are getting our water from the store or buying it in a bottle. A lot of us are filtering our water from the tap. A lot of us are not really walking around with the consideration of where water's coming from, what's happening to it, what is it doing to us? And so, and what is it doing for us? And with the notion that we don't really own this world, we're a part of the world. We get to live in this world. So if we don't own the world, we don't own the water. We live with whatever it lives in the water. We live with whatever lives around us, and we want to live just as much as everybody else does. So with that in mind, Amanda pays attention to protecting life in this way because she lives in this area. She wants her water to be clean. And the St. Vrain River, as you heard, is the only water source for this area. And it was being threatened.
Well, it's interesting you just brought up Standing Rock, and it made me think just this week we had an oil tanker spill in Lyons, Colorado. Did you hear about that? And it's actually contaminated the St. Vrain River with oil. And, the one saving grace in the St. Vrain is that we don't have the right kind of shale for fracking. So whereas in other parts of Boulder County, you have, the bigger debate, or the most known debate would be against the fracking companies. Okay. And coming close, we had a big explosion in Firestone a couple of years ago, an uncapped well. And that's what we hear a lot about. And in the St. Vrain River, or in the St. Vrain Valley, that's here because of the river, it's gravel mining. That's primo gravel. And so we have the cement plant, CEMEX, Mexican cement, that people, it's sort of very used to seeing, because it's been here, since I bought my property, and it's been here a long time. But I've come to learn that CEMEX is the most toxic industry. Cement making is the most toxic industry, environmentally speaking. And gravel mining is not too far behind. And
in what way is it toxic?
So, without being a chemist, it's a lot of the emissions and the things that are released into the air. I know as a photographer, I've documented the plume and the things that with gravel mining, for example, then it's the crushed gravel or the crystalline silica, and it's in the manufacturing process that it's toxic to local communities, as well as you have very serious water contamination concerns. A lot of people here are on city water, but again, it just like in Standing Rock, it wasn't just the people of North Dakota, it was everything down the Missouri River that would be affected. And in fact, since we were there, exactly. And since we were there, and the Lakota saying, Miniwachoni, water is life. So, we're learning as the human species that you can't manufacture that. You have the CEO of Nestle a few years back and still talking about privatization of water. So, and, everything from pop culture and Mad Max, water's the new oil. So we should be paying attention to water rights, who owns them, and because you control the water, you do control the food and the wildlife. And that's one of the reasons that we're here. And Save Our St. Vrain Valley has done a lot of work around protecting the aquifers. My own well is within 500 yards, although I did not know that at the beginning of the proposed mining operation, which they have to gravel mine, they have to drop the water table. So the last time that there was active mining in the St. Vrain, some neighbors of ours got their artisanal spring dried up permanently, and their well was severely damaged and still being maintained by one of the mining companies involved with previous mining in the St. Vrain Valley. And that's why we've been opposing it for 5 years. We've started off opposing Martin Marietta Materials, 800 acres, but since then we have fought CEMEX Cement's permit extension application, as well as Aggregate Industries, 300 acres in a very recreational area called Pella Crossing. And so where we're at, there's no fracking, but it's primo gravel. So you have a lot of people, especially now with the cost of gravel being so high, that are, vying for these natural resources to the detriment of the local wildlife, the community that has, formed here. There's always community, but of course, according to the census, it's just astronomical growth from the time that these permits were applied for in 1998. And that was the basis for our legal argument that enabled us thus far to protect the natural resources, the water of the St. Vrain, the gravel, and even so, we're met with a lot of catastrophe around the oil tanker that spilled, that just contaminated the water. We've had 2 teenagers killed in the last 6 months in the valley. One was on Nebo, Kelsey, 17-year-old, just working on his brand new, first car, not brand new, but first car. And he was killed by a head-on cement truck on Nelson Road in North 51st. It's a very regarded and loved family from Black Cat Farms. So one of their sons was killed by a head-on collision from a tanker. And these are the casualties that we don't even think about when we are protecting the local community, or the local community could take for granted, but they're real threats. I mean, just the Martin Marietta permit authorized an additional 240 trucks, gondola trucks, a day, leaving and entering the Lyons plant. And like I said, I mean, the effects of the oil tanker on near Apple Valley Road, we don't know. I don't know the environmental impact, and but we will find out. But the human impact, we've been really hit hard, as I said, by there was an accident on 66. It was a big rig, also killed a 16-year-old. And then the Black Cat family that was tragically impacted by these industrial trucks in areas that have gotten way more populated, and it's no longer an appropriate use.
So I remember when I lived in Vermont that in my travels, I was in someone's house that was talking to me about their health issues. And at this time, I wasn't even in, focusing on wellness per se, though I remember that I guess I was, because I remember this, but yeah, he lived next to a factory and he had emphysema, and his house constantly was being delivered from next door, basically, this soot that was just covering everything in a film, and his family was breathing it all in and getting ill, and be, and it was very very dangerous. And yeah, I just remember that, and so when you live in a community that is centered around, or that is, let's just say, next to or hosting something that is polluting the air, let's just be honest, everybody is affected by that, and there's nobody more important in the community than the people living in the community, and that's us. That's you and your own community. So the reason why I brought Amanda here today is to talk more about how we can reveal the power that we have in our own communities as sovereign beings who care and we're citizens of this area. We have the ability to respond to what we see. There's every reason to stand up for what we believe in a good way, and to find success, by the grace of God. And Amanda has, with a team of people who are very dedicated. They've been going hard for quite some time. And I think it's very important for us to know how, this happened, what was going on, what is going on, how it gets done, to actually get some traction and a smile out of knowing that you're able to live here longer and be healthy. And so can we open up a window into that and just talk about the process and what, a little bit more about, obviously you spoke about some of the issues, but, living here and seeing what's going on and then stepping up, and like, what is that like, becoming an activist and actually finding success in something that means the world to you and your family?
It's interesting. I don't like to define myself, in the negative, but we got a little media coverage from the latest Colorado Appeals Court opinion victory on behalf of SOSBV's legal suit, and the three judges unanimously concurred that to overturn the district court's decision that the Martin Marietta special use was still active. And they define us in the context of mining foes. And the truth is, I never thought about mining. It's you're going along living your life, and activist is really an activated person who's paying attention. And I think even, the beauty of the crazy of the last 2020, hindsight's 2020, is that I think that we're waking up to the fact that we better best get involved in our lives and not to take those things for granted. So that's how I see myself as an activated person. This is going to happen. It has repercussions, and you can't help but speak your mind. At the same time, that there's so much to pay attention to, that there's so many distractions, and so many false flags and red herrings, some intentional and some random, that it's easy to take little things for granted, such as the water. Or I'm from Florida, and now they're releasing genetically modified mosquitoes. And I grew up there. I never knew about malaria. Never had anybody I know get malaria. So the spin, the propaganda machine and the spin is very interesting to distract us. And honestly, I can't imagine anything that would occupy my interest now that I've been activated to the long-term effects of things like living in communities with mining or taking the water for granted, that would be more fascinating that actual Frankensteinian proposal by Oxytec and Bill Gates to release millions, and it's been done in Africa, and it's done various places. And so, how do you undo those things? How do you, there's recovery to try to get the oil back in the tanker, but like once you miss the boat, you miss the boat. So I think it's, it comes from a passion and a realization and an activation, but it's not, there's no one, an activist is no different than the average person. They didn't decide, I want to spend my life opposing industry. We entrusted agencies, federal agencies, local agencies, to have that role. But the realization is, if you're not policing them yourself, and if you're not working with them, monitoring them, that's why the Martin Marietta project was approved in 7 minutes flat when the community didn't know about it. 7 minutes flat is less than a minute per 100 acres.
What you call fast tracked.
That's pretty fast tracked, and we didn't get the memo. And then once we did get the memo and got involved, I feel like the local agencies learned a lot about the resources that are here, the environmental concerns. It's not a maleficent agenda necessarily. It's not knowing or being bombarded with things to deal with. But individual involvement, I think, is critical to shape the future and protect these resources, which are dwindling. And that's why the St. Vrain Valley is such a hot, they all want the gravel now. It's primo gravel. And it's the same with water, and it's the same with the natural resources is what is the driving force.
Yeah, that's something that is, it's happening in our world, and I mean, we're in a house right now. There's we're on roads. There's obviously needs for these kinds of resources to be utilized. What is the balance to, or let's just say finding the balance to utilizing resources in a way that is less impactful on humans, less impactful on the wildlife, and of course as little impact as possible. In fact, let's just say zero impact on the water table and on the water, on the land itself. That's just, it seems to me to be kind of a no-brainer. This is where we live, and it, it leads me to think about so much, really. And one of the things that I want to talk about is, you've all heard of our national bird, and if you don't know what I'm talking about the American bald eagle. And the bald eagle is, or at least was, is it still a protected species?
It is not endangered. It is protected.
Okay.
And it's had a huge resurgence since we discontinued the use of DDT.
Mm-hmm.
That was a direct correlation, and that luckily at that time they didn't try to dilute that. Somehow it was actually protected, and discovered that the shells couldn't form, and so it's made a comeback. But I just have to
DDT was
say,
being used as a pesticide on farms.
That's right. And you had kids running behind trucks. I hear from the old time farmers, and they just didn't know. And some people knew. Make no mistake, some people knew. and it was, they didn't know what to do with the chemicals, and they thought, well, it works as this, and we'll do it no matter what. So, but it's just, that's an example of how we learn, and just a direct correlation between agricultural practices. Gravel mining falls under agriculture in Colorado. So to them, they're just exercising their mineral rights. And by them, I mean the mining behemoths and the corporate entities and multinationals that we are opposing. But anyway, they figured this out, and yes, the eagle has made a huge comeback, although not in Colorado. So Florida, where I'm from, there's a lot, but that, we get into tricky situations because we do have an eagle nest in the project area, Martin Marietta, and we call them the beloved bald eagle, hygiene eagles, because people stop all the time. They photograph them all the time. It's like
there's two in this nest right across on the land that they were proposing to drill on.
To gravel
mine on,
yes.
Excuse me. Okay.
Yes. And so basically, people think, well, they're protected. But essentially, if you have $100,000, you can buy an eagle nest. You can unprotect them, because
you can buy an eagle nest.
Wow. You can do a disruption of nest. And that happens all the time here, and it happens a lot for developers, and it happens a lot. It just happened here in Erie. We have a wonderful geologist that studies all the bald eagle population in the Front Range. Dana Beauvais and his group do amazing work, and they even hired somebody to come back and rebuild an eagle nest to see if they could lure the eagle pair. But it happens all the time. They can disrupt the nest intentionally, and the birds leave. And bald eagles really need a cottonwood in Colorado to nest. So they're very limited. It's very different from Florida or Alaska or other bald eagle populations.
So thank you for explaining that. I love the birds, and they're just fascinating and beautiful and humongous, and definitely love learning about them and seeing them. It's a blessing. And so if you would, let's just go back to the window of, I know I said becoming an activist, and you spoke some really beautiful words on that. And I just want to step forward, if we could, into what it takes to actually have an impact in your community when something like this is going down. What did you guys actually do? You know, I imagine that you had conversations, and then you decided to take it into some other buildings, and so on and so forth. So what was the process like?
So some of our work involved specific campaigns. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, the group of neighbors got together. We have a steering committee, and we have a board comprised of 3 board members. And then we discussed what are the issues and studied the permit. And there was a whole discovery phase. I took a special interest in the archaeological studies that were done back in 1998, and delving into that for the other proposed area. But so we formed different subcommittees of, folks that have special gifts, and just to get educated on what's here, what are some of the issues, what's the wording. And
so the neighbors got together, and you said, what's your strong points? And then you decided to figure out
why don't you do this, you do that, and then we'll apply for this, and we'll become, we'll do that. And then we've run multiple campaigns since then. But absolutely, part of that is, my co-founder and wonderful man by the name of Richard Cargill, who's my next door neighbor. He and his wife Barb, and a couple of the former watchdogs. These guys had defended the valley from tire burning, from a special use permit that CMEX still holds to burn tires if they choose to. And we know it's quite toxic, but they thought it would be a good idea, and they had that permit. And so then we applied for grants. I applied for some grants, and we were very grateful to Patagonia, who has really given us their support and retail grant and other resources for the last 4 years consecutively. Even in 2020, even Patagonia was hit very hard by the closure of businesses and some of the measures, Corona measures. And so they did grants by invitation only. We were blessed and honored to receive their invitation to apply. So that can't be underestimated. And Lush charity pot from Lush Cosmetics, so which also have a presence locally. We got their grant. Western Mining Action Network, who does amazing work all over the world with mining projects and hard rock mining. They've been one of our sponsors, and Indigenous Environmental Network as well.
And with the sponsors, you were able to run campaigns?
We were able to hire a lawyer.
Okay.
Land use attorney, Ireland and Stapleton. Once we were at the stage where we'd taken it to the legal arena.
Okay.
We'd exhausted our, plea to the county. County, in our opinion,
okay, so you guys got together
to make the wrong decision.
It wasn't working out, and you said, okay, now we need some money.
It worked out. It delayed the project for about a year.
Okay.
We said,
just
show us that you've been
you guys developed.
Just from our group. And our group has grown from a 7-member steering committee to about 2,000 members that are on our mailing list.
Okay. That's amazing. And so working with the city, you got things a little bit delayed. And then you guys said, okay, we need to hire a lawyer. So you figured out where there were funds potentially available, and you decided to submit requests or
project proposals for the grants. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you got them. And then you were able to hire a lawyer to
take the advocacy to the judiciary branch, and advocate for us. And they're a very, very talented group of attorneys.
Certainly.
That go up against the big guys from Washington and Denver that represent oil and gas. So those are the lawyers that these guys go up against. And I think it's product of the times, and I think truth is being revealed.
So there was a decision recently.
There was a pivotal decision recently at the probably the highest court except for the U.S. Supreme Court. And to that end, we could end up at the Colorado Supreme Court should Martin Marietta has a deadline of May 13th
to appeal
to the Colorado Supreme Court.
the decision that you guys were given.
The Colorado Court of Appeals decision that this permit has expired based on Article 4604 of the Land Use Code, the land use provision, the 5-year lapse provision, which says basically if you don't use a special use permit within 5 years, it has expired. And that's for all the reasons that we spoke of, such as conditions changing, the census, the people moving to the area, existing uses of the area, historic considerations of the area, existing uses of those fields.
Good boy. So we were talking about getting the community together, getting a lawyer together, and getting sponsors, getting a lawyer, because you weren't getting what you needed from the local government in order to protect your homes. Is that really what was going on?
Yes, to protect land, existing uses of the fields, existing identity of the town of Hygiene, which is, every town's got one, and so here people might come to see the birds and to go to the little historic downtown and things. So there were so many things that this project threatened, from the environment to the truck traffic, to the air quality, to possible water contamination, to people's retirements and youth being transformed by a 30-year mining project that they weren't expecting. Mining projects later we learned. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was more than one.
And this kind of thing where people are living in a beautiful town or beautiful area, and all of a sudden, a big company comes in. Perhaps they were there before. In this case, they've been there, though they weren't doing anything for quite some time. And you said that the permit was from 1998?
That's right. And I've pointed out, there's language to protect, language in county ordinances generally, to protect people from that kind of dramatic change over time, where permit holders can't take out a permit, sit on their permit rights until the cost goes exponentially through the roof, and then say, well, we're gonna use them now. And that's essentially what's happened, or what happened here.
Basically, there was a time where they bought this property expecting perhaps one day they might want to use it.
They bought the mineral rights. So it's even more ambiguous. So they own some land, but most of the land is public land. It's open space. Boulder Park's an open space. So it's open space land. And that has been quite popular in very green cities, like Boulder County, where they purchase land in Boulder County for with taxpayer money to keep it open. But then they will lease the mineral rights to oil and gas, and they will lease the land to genetically modified food production. So you have a place that people believe is very green because you have open space, but although it's bought with taxpayer money, this is what happens locally. Then the county is duly profiting by leasing it out without public input, really, or in spite of public input, to very environmentally destructive corporations. And yes, although it's things that we need, like people point out, there's always a point where it's no longer appropriate. So when people have to decide for their own local communities, when have you reached that point of saturation? If SOSVV had not formed and gotten involved, our county would be very similar to neighboring counties where it's ruled by industry and extractive industry at that. So.
And basically the alternative for you guys is to say, are you saying that this kind of stuff shouldn't be done in society, or are you saying that you would prefer you need it to not be done near civilization, so to speak?
It has to be appropriate. If Martin Marietta or CEMEX or Aggregate Industries or whomever else wants to gravel mine, they need to do a proper environmental impact study, which we've been foregoing nationally lately, and that's critical.
That was going on with Standing Rock, just the same.
That's right. So that's critical, and they need to take out a new permit.
And many other places in the country and in the world, let's be honest.
That's right. So here they could apply for a new permit. They would be held to current conditions. We would still be opposing them because we don't think it's appropriate use of the land. And we don't think it's warranted to have, they've allowed their permit to expire. Arguably, they bought an expired permit and they were warned about it at the time. So, they took a business risk. And so there comes a time when it's no longer appropriate. When you're talking about a census that shows that there's been more than a 10 time increase, the permit allows for wording such as if there's changes in information and technology. In 1998, Google was unincorporated and working out of a basement apartment in California. I've told the county, I think we can all agree to put it historically, it's last millennium. I think we can all agree there's been changes in technology and information since 1998, including the 2013 floods, where every single previously mined pretty pond in the project area ruptured in the same frame. So, it's just, we have evidence. So
there was a natural flood and it uprooted all of these.
They ruptured the previously mined ponds from the times when the county deemed it appropriate to mine, and it was not as populated. And we didn't know, but we had the 1,000-year flood or the 100-year flood. I've heard both. And so, but we're in the floodplain where the county states, and, I advise people research your location and classification. Like we are in a moderate where you are geologically. Start to see yourself, as just that interconnected with the land. And so,
to see if you're in a floodplain or if you're on a hill, or just to understand natural law, so to speak.
Natural laws and even the
impact
local
it might have on you.
Yep, and the local laws, because the county determines in their mapping of Boulder County that we are in a moderate hazard zone where all intensive uses should be discouraged. So pointing out these incongruencies, gravel mining is by all can possibly assess it, an intensive use. And maybe they'd gotten away with it, but then boom, comes 2013, we have floods, and the rupturing of these previously mined ponds caused taxpayers $3 million in a public recreational hotspot here in the area. And again, the people that mined those pretty ponds, they were not responsible. Taxpayers paid for those repairs. The ruptures in our project area caused flooding in non-floodplain areas of Longmont. So there's a cost post mining that is being fronted by the citizens. That would also be affected by losses in water quality, water quantity.
Now, everywhere in the world is different. And I remember seeing a movie with Matt Damon where they were looking to stop fracking, I believe it was. And, they were going against a big company in the town that was, had a lot of money, a lot of propaganda, a lot of backing. And in the movie, they Matt Damon got some kickback. And so, you're going up against some big wigs and, you know, these big companies that aren't playing games, and they, you know, they're pretty serious. And obviously, you all aren't playing games either. And, you know, I believe that there's every reason to harmonize rather than fight. And so to understand that we are all requiring the same care to live, you know, that in my eyes and heart supersedes man's wants, you know. And so there's honoring each other and the respect of being alive and a human being at that. So with that, like, what did you guys experience with putting your names and your faces and your lives out there like that in such a way? You know, anything at all? Did you consider it, or is it? You said that you were in the paper in some ways that weren't necessarily fun, and you know, I feel like, what would you say to anybody out there who, you know, might be thinking like, hey, I really want to protect my area. I really want to protect my home. I really want to protect my water source. And I have fear. And, you know,
Well, I
what
think Standing Rock was an indoctrination of that for me. I put together some training programs and gave those out in a few schools. And it's interesting, depending on the demographics of the school, the concerns. And the best question asked was, were you not afraid if you were, you know, standing in front of a sniper or whatever? And I think it goes back to the same thing that we're doing here. We just affirm that we're acting in accordance to truth. And, you know, perhaps there's been some intimidation. You know, my mailbox has been taken down a couple of times. I can't attribute blame because I don't give it any energy. Got put back up. And, you know, I just stand in my truth. I can only speak my truth. And then what other people do is up to them. If they're caught doing it, then obviously then they'll have to answer for their actions. But it's where you put your focus. My focus would be on the water, on the community, on protecting the wildlife, on the beautiful eagles. And so when you stand in your own integrity, I think we have help. Here, there's a lot, like I mentioned, the archaeology. There's just a lot of, there's burial grounds, archaeology that was found in 1998 with preliminary studies. So we are also beholden to the ancestors, right, to protect that from being, as it was in Standing Rock, just dug up and for profit. They actually jumped ahead in order to be able to do that and bypass some regulations. So we've been lucky here so far. We've been able to do that. And that's where we're headed next is actually conservation, where I'd like to get to.
Talk about it.
So we're going to be registering those fields. 30 sites in the Barton Marietta project area were recommended for registration with the National Registry of Historic Places. And that was the archaeologists and historians' advice based on their mandatory environmental impact studies, which included archaeology. Preliminary class 3 historic studies that were basically just shovel testing still yielded 240 artifacts, including the westernmost pottery and historic irrigation sites, Pilgrim, and burial sites, Pilgrim and Native. So for me, we were blessed to be able to do lodges and to address the ancestral trauma that has happened through colonization here. And currently, having multiple areas where Native American leaders are in a way purifying the land and honoring and healing that trauma and honoring the ancestors of the land. I think that's been a big part of our success. And I think that
they're recording. I just coughed
realm,
out of nowhere. I haven't coughed this whole time. I don't know what's going on.
There you go.
They're like,
it's the truth, yay. And so now I think it's, taking that into the realm of making sure that Native American populations that may be interested and maybe their ancestors, that they know it's there. If it's not registered, how does anybody know what was there? We all
Mm.
suffer from amnesia and overwhelm, especially, as time progresses. So that's where I like to see this go. And we're starting that initiative. We've requested that the county do it. We had some Lakota leaders, and the Lakota people, they are a part of the tribal council for Boulder County because of archaeology that has been found in the area, placing the Lakota people as part of the tribal people of the land. But of course, the Arapaho, the Ute, we don't actually know who's buried in those fields, but we know that we really don't want the mining companies digging them up, and that we'd like to offer the gifts of our discovery of the last 5 years and our review of these mandatory studies that reveal what's in those fields to honor those recommendations made over 2 decades ago.
It's important, I believe, to apply the knowledge that we ascertain in the flow of the natural state. And what I mean by that is anytime I learn something, if I begin to apply it to my life, I'm going to benefit from what I just learned. That's wisdom. Knowledge applied is wisdom. And so, somebody said to me today, like, you're choosing that? We're taking steps backwards? Why are we going backwards? And I said, brother, we're taking a step forward, utilizing the palette of the world available to us with the information that we are learning as time moves on. And with that, it's important that we respond to our abilities to make the best choices that are going to suit us and those around us. And so this is why I've decided to take this step forward. And I think that it's important that we understand that putting our best foot forward is the mature thing to do, to be a man or a woman. And to be a responsible citizen and to say, hey, I now know more than I knew before, and this is the best way. And yes, at every point in time, somebody said, we have to do this. And that is the smartest thing. People who are digging up for XYZ, or people who are doing whatever, think it's necessary. In fact, they know it to their core, and that's why they're doing it. I can't imagine that they're an evil villain digging it up and saying, I think that they think it's necessary. And so, I don't know everything, though I do know that I've met a lot of people who, and I've met people who people have called good. I've met people who people have called bad, and I've seen this glimmer of light in everybody to where, we all believe at some rate what we're doing, and those that don't are sick, and say later, I didn't even know what I was doing, or whatever it is. And so that exists too. There's a full spectrum of possibilities that exist, obviously. But yeah, I feel like just understanding, learning, feeling, connecting, and again, it leads me back to diet, because if I'm not taking care of myself, then what am I going to care? What am I going to give 2 shits about me, about you? I'm going to care about my pocket. I'm going to care about potentially my family. I'm not going to care about anybody else. And the fact is, we're going to do what we're going to do, and you're going to deal with it because this is America, and leave me alone. I'm going to leave you alone. But the fact is that if what I'm doing impacts you and everybody around me, I'm not leaving you alone. And so, it's important to just, I believe it's important that we just take a step back and be able to have a conversation about what is best for us. And yes, people who have jobs and careers and families that are relying upon these historical channels of income, let's just call it. A lot of people who are digging up, who are mining, and who are working on rigs, they're feeding their family, and they believe that they're good people that are working a job, and this is what they learned how to do, and nobody's going to tell them anything otherwise. And I believe that too. And at the same time, I think that I know that there's cleaner resources in the world that are available to us in order to harness energy. And if energy wasn't free, then how are we alive?
We wouldn't have evolved.
We wouldn't even be able
we wouldn't even be here.
Yeah.
And that's the dangerous part. You bring up a good point. It's not the people that are working in an industry or not. Then it's finding the right location to still do it while researching better technologies to do it, but even green technologies. You have to really go down the rabbit hole to explore their environmental impact. And I think you bring up a critical point too, right now, where we're, warp speeding ahead to there comes a time to pause. And that's essentially what we did here, to pause and then to reflect on lessons learned. And to give credit where credit is due in our county, I feel that the land use department appears to have done that. And it has, the advocacy work has led to some landmark decisions, not easy decisions, but when you get into the good, the evil, there is this relativity to it. At the same time, though, when you're dealing with corporate entities and corporations being given the rights of individuals, then those are one of those things where you have to take a step back. And I feel to, again, reclaim the 5-year lapse provision that was promulgated, locally, to protect citizens and the wildlife from
Corporate
interest. But we do have, and I do believe, the machine of the corporations, they don't have a conscience. It's very easy to dilute that. It's comprised of people, but the ones making the decision aren't the workers in the fields. And we can create and find green jobs that would probably be better. Black lung is real, So if it's not good for us, it's certainly not good for the people in the field. And there's perhaps a transitional period. I just know that for the most important thing is location, geography, plug into yours. Is it an appropriate use? Or is it an inappropriate use based on the environmental impact that it would have, and the present moment, not 20 years ago. It's in the present moment, given what we've learned. Let's take that pause and really be honest about assessing lessons learned and making different choices.
Amanda, one of the things that charge us in this ability to stay par for the course when things aren't going our way, and when we have healthy fears about what's going to happen to our home and to the land that's around here, to life as we know it, is holding on to prayer. Mm-hmm. And I know personally that that's something that you sought and utilized and benefited from. And I'd love for you to just speak on faith a little bit, in terms of how to remember to be mindful of the goal and the journey.
I think the way to remember is to be in it. So I think just by, at first it might have been an intuitive, well, let's move to the country. But the country shapes you. You might have had an intention, or it shaped me and my children. And so that's the power of nature. If we must get out in nature, the more difficult things get, the more the answers are actually in nature. Regardless of the religion or just immersing, yourself, whether it's on a hiking trail or taking off your shoes and walking outside in your own yard, but taking that conscious step to be open to receiving, because I think the earth gives us everything we need and is the link to spirit. It's not about, overcoming our humanity. It's about immersing ourselves in that recognition that we are part of nature, even though we're human, and going there for help.
Yeah, a lot of people get discouraged, when you believe in something so strongly, and when it affects you and it affects everything around you, and don't know what to do. And so I wanted to support everybody's ability to remember our innate nature and ability to connect with source and with whatever it is that helps us find comfort, because we choose our reality. And aside from what impacts us from everybody else choosing our reality, so if I'm choosing my reality again and it's overlapping into your reality, well then who am I? What am I doing? What are we doing? Perhaps we can have a conversation about how we can both coexist in a way that, you could be happy, I could be happy. And if the only way that I could be happy is by making money off of this area, well then there's a conversation that probably needs to be had there, because there's a whole community, and the same person, I believe, that feels that we're going to get this field, we're going to get that field. There's another field everywhere you go. Is it's all of us, and at one point of our life, or in another time where we can, we have to understand that, we're all in the image of Creator. And so in that way, again, we all feel as though, in a way, we're doing something right. We're serving a certain purpose, and that's what each of us are doing. We're driven to a certain way. Some of us are driven to balance out what we call the negative. Some of us are driven to do what some call, the positive, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, that's the yin and yang of this existence that's ever flowing and breathing. And that's what it's all about. Is the only way the balance happens is when we're doing our part and when we're called to it. And so may we just continue to take a deep breath and take a step back and really consider what impacts us, what impacts our family, and then understand truly that we're all the same in that way, and we all want clean air. We all need clean water. We all want to have nutritious food. We all need it to survive. We all want to be able to go outside without being infringed upon, our rights without being, we want to have, enjoy our rights. And this is America. So we have, freedom. And with that, we should be able to represent, ourselves and each other in a unified way. And in a way that we know now to be better than before. And that's what enlightenment for evolution is all about. And that's why being intelligent matters, and taking care of ourselves, because we're all intelligent. What are we feeding ourselves? And then what are we reflecting back to ourselves in the world? So with that, thank you. And thank you for this interview. Thank you for your work out here in our world. Thank you for protecting those birds, protecting this land, protecting this river that is the source of life for so much here. And thank you to all your cohorts, your teammates, and people that helped out, and everybody, and the sponsors who everybody, the attorneys.
Takes a village.
It takes a village, and is there anything that you want to leave the people with, or contribute to the people? Is there anything that when you're, walking around and driving around or farming, you're like, I just wish people knew this, this would be an awesome time.
Just to check in with their inner voice, not be afraid to take that pause and to change course. If it's time to change course, just that permission, I think will free people and get us congruent to what is, and not what should be or what was or what could be, but be in the moment, by really honoring what is coming to you in the moment, based on the information that you've gleaned, and those hard lessons, those mistakes that we've made. And whether that's like, hey, gravel mining really doesn't work in this area because we're in the floodplain, because people have moved, or whether it's a different shift in personal relationship. I think that we just need people to be listening to that divine guidance from within, seeking it, And I find that the best place for that, to find those answers, is in nature.
Mhm. Well, thank you for those words of wisdom and your acts of kindness. And, it seems like quite often we benefit from, the notion of free our mind and the rest will follow. And sometimes we square ourselves up in this box and we say, no, not going outside this box because it's bad out there and I have deemed this. Yet, it's I've done that, and it's kind of a rigid way to be. And when we open ourselves up to the unknown, we begin to experience the vast majority of what is out here, and ultimately that is the unknown and where the magic takes place. So I too support our ability to remember what it is we love, because our magic is what we love. Nobody loves what you love the same way that you love it. And so when you contribute that to our world, you are the magician. And so with that, we're gonna go out in the same way we always do, being grateful for the miracle of life and sharing a nice, deep, easy breath together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Love.
Subscribe to the Pharms Not Farms podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.